Welcome to Decisions Days 2023 at the beautiful oceanfront here in Virginia Beach. And welcome to our presentation of end-to-end architecture. So we'll do a little round of introductions here real quick. I'm Tim Stahl, I'm the Senior Director of Architecture here at Decisions. About a 3.5-4 year employee with about 20 years of experience in running IT shops, business analysis, applications administration, et cetera. I'm joined by my colleague.
Hi, I'm Heath Hibbard. I'm one of the other directors on the professional services team on the implementation side. About 25 years of experience in the professional services space across the SDLC, so architecture, implementation, project and program management.
So our agenda today, what are we going to talk about, right? We've got a half hour with you. What are we going to fill your minds with? First thing, when we talk about architecture, we want to start with our foundation, right? You need a strong foundation when building any kind of software project. Then we'll go into a process called an MVP, minimally viable product, versus a long-term planning engagement. Next, our shared goals. So when we go into this engagement, when we enter into it, what should you expect from us? What should we expect from you? Planning for success, right? What does success look like? What does failure look like? We'll dive into both of those topics. Deliverables. So we get through this whole thing. What are you gonna end up with at the end? What are we gonna hand you? And finally, Q&A. Now, the one thing I want to say about Q&A, I like a conversational kind of approach to these. So please, if you have questions throughout the process, shout them out. Raise your hand. Say, hey, I want a clarifying point, or I have a counterpoint I want to make. I love to hear from you during the process so you don't forget them when we get to the end. So please, feel free at any time. Stop us. We have a few audience participation slides in here too, so we'll make sure everybody's still paying attention. Nobody's falling asleep. So again, as we go through this, please feel free to let us know. So to get started, as I mentioned, with any kind of software development engagement or software architecture engagement, you need to have a strong foundation. So what's this building in the background here? I don't know if anybody recognize that from the, it's kind of hard to see probably in the purple. It's not, other coast. So that is the Millennium Tower. Sits in the heart of downtown San Francisco. Some of you may have heard of this before. It's pretty infamous in the past 10 years. Was constructed in 2009, okay? The problem we have, this is a 58-story building sitting on clay in San Francisco Bay. If you've ever seen it, it's kind of mushy and murky there. The poor thing's leaning about 29.3 degrees or inches to the side at this point. Not exactly what you want from your building, right? If you have a residence in one of these nice top penthouse floors and you set a basketball on the floor, what's that thing doing? It's rolling into the corner. The problem with this is it was built using piles. So the foundation was building these concrete piles run into the old clay there in the bay. Now, back in 2009, that was standard, right? That's what you did. You know, any building that was around there, you put it into the clay. You didn't necessarily go down to the bedrock, a little bit further, a little bit more expensive, a little bit different. But again, it was typical for that time. The problem was when the building opened, what happens in a city, especially a city like that was growing? Think about 2009 in San Francisco, 2010 when it was done. More buildings were being built around it. Old stuff was being torn down. New foundations were being put up. What does that do? Well, it starts settling the clay around there. So what starts happening, the building starts listing. And you know, what they ended up with is now they're in a situation where I've got a 58-story building full of residents who paid upwards of $13 million for one of the apartments there. Crazy to think about, right? How long is this going to take? How much is it going to cost to fix this? What do you do with the residents right there? You know, you can't, I wouldn't imagine you want to do anything while they're in there. What happens if it goes the other direction? It all comes back to when they designed this, when they built the foundation, they didn't consider the risks associated with their surroundings. They considered exactly what they were building for, and it was great. It was perfect. Met all the code, met all the requirements. But as other buildings, like there was a transit center next door, they bulldozed and reconstructed. As that was being built, they didn't take into account the settling of the sediment around it and the clay around it, and the building started listing. So again, all goes back to being built on a faulty foundation. We didn't plan for what we didn't know or what we didn't anticipate. Designing software, as you guys know, same challenges, right? You know, it's all about requirements gathering. What are you trying to build? What are we trying to get to? What story are we trying to solve? What problem are we trying to assess? Scoping. We may have a problem that's this big, but to get the answer we need, scope might be this, right? We want to come to an agreement on what that scope looks like. Designing for scale. The unknown unknowns. And we didn't know that they were going to build buildings next to us. And it was going to start tilting the building. Not expecting the risks associated with software development, right? Maybe you have 10 users now, and in a month you have 100 users. Is that something you could have predicted? And again, laying a solid foundation for growth and scale in the long term. Audience participation time. So, anybody, raise your hand. What are your expectations surrounding architecture? If you were coming to me right now, I bought Decisions, I signed a license, I want architecture. Anybody, raise a hand. What are your expectations surrounding software architecture?
Scalability.
Scalability?
Yeah.
Okay. Anybody else?
Multi-tenancy.
Multi-tenancy? Okay, that's a good one. Performance. Perfect. But are there certain deliverables? Are there certain items that you would expect us to get as part of this? Are there things you'd expect us to do as part of this? Think about projects that you've built. I look around the room, we've got a good mix of both decisionites and partners and current clients, like things that you've built. When you're defining it, what are your expectations of the outcome?
So yeah, we operate under an SDLC, right? This is how we interpret the software delivery life cycle. It's in components. We break it down to discovery, design, plan, implement, and then maintenance or support. The discovery component is the gathering of requirements, right? It's understanding the needs of the client, the needs of the use case. It's defining the scaling requirements, whoever said scaling. It's understanding the project load, the number of users, the structure and the components and relationships of the system, how they interact with each other, and creates a clear product roadmap, but also mitigates the potential risks, or at least tries to understand what the risks are. From discovery, and this is a part of that engagement, right, that we talk about in architecture, we enter into design. And design is where our architects understand the content that was received through the discovery process, and they start to translate these things into how decisions will handle it, right? So we use what's called a requirements traceability matrix, a component of a work breakdown structure, if you're familiar with traditional project management terms. What the RTM does is allows us to understand at the granular level what work needs to get done to meet this requirement. It's one of two outputs, one of two deliverables from our architecture session, one of which is a scoping document, which Tim will talk about, and then the Agile RTM. It enables efficient communication and reduces the ambiguity associated with, hey, how do I translate my want into an actual piece of functioning software? And ultimately, it's iterated upon. This design is iterated upon between our architect and our clients. They have a first pass, they go back, they put it back in front of the client, and we have a conversation about what gaps need to be filled, right? What it does is allows that design component allows for all parties to be on the same page. From there, we enter into a planning stage. Once we agree, like this is exactly how we want stuff built to our understanding in the moment, we enter into a planning phase. We're establishing the project framework. How will a project operate? What are the rules of this project? Who are the stakeholders? We're gathering those necessary resources, not just internally, right, from the decision side, but more importantly from the client side. Who are the subject matter experts that need to be engaged with this project? It's fairly common that towards the back end of an engagement, a new stakeholder name appears, and they come and they throw a monkey wrench in the whole process, right? We have to start all over again. So that's a part of that planning stage, identifying those stakeholders. After planning, we enter into the implementation. This is where we actually build. And we do operate off of an agile process, a modified Scrum, if you're familiar, where we iterate. We operate off of sprints. We build an MVP, right, hopefully. And then we start to build upon the foundation of that MVP. We want to ensure a scalable model, right? So we want to have a long-term vision, but a short term of what are we doing today to meet that long-term vision. Post-implementation, we enter into the testing phase, right, or the integrations phase. So we're building the backbone, we're building the foundation, we're putting up maybe 3 stories of the high rise, and then we iterate upon that, right? We go to an integration stage where those external integrations are met and tested, right, or created and tested to the client's satisfaction, and then we move into a maintenance phase, which is that maintenance and support handed over to our support group, who then manages that.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And so, you know, we talked about our SDLC, we talked about expectations, right? We're going to get into some meat and potatoes of this, right? Like when we talk about architecture, you know, what is it and what is it not, right? A lot of times we get a misconception when we as professional services enter into an architecture engagement. So to us, what is architecture? So when you come to us and say, I've signed a license, I've got a new project I want to build, I've got this great idea here, this great thing I'm going to solve for. I'm going to make a lot of money for my business, or I'm going to reduce the workload on my clients. I'm going to, you know, further help my students graduate. And it's, hey, see, I got a higher ed one in there. So what is it? So defining the scope, right? Part of architecture is really us helping you analyze and define the scope of your project. We are professionals at doing that. We have business analysts on our team and architects on our team who've built multitudes of projects within decisions. You know, most of us are 3-4 years in the tool, right? We've done this over and over and over again. Defining the requirements. What are the things we want to build? From a high level, okay? We use the building as an analogy, okay? We need a foundation, we got to build some floors, we have a lobby, we're putting a Starbucks in, we've got some residences above it, we have some elevators. You know, what are those requirements we need to have? Integrations and security, it's a big one, right? What tools are we as decisions going to integrate with? You know, do you have ServiceNow, Jira, name other cloud-based thing? You know, are we talking to an ERP? Do we need to define what that looks like? Security, do you have HIPAA, FERPA, this, that, all those different things that are out there, PCI, you know, I could keep going. Are there security implementations that we need to meet as part of this that we need to consider, right? There's a million ways to build something, decisions. Maybe the one that I'm working on right now, because I don't know that maybe you're in a high trust environment, I need to encrypt everything at rest and in transit. You know, I'm not thinking about that as part of it. We need to dive into all those features. Who's gonna use it? I build this thing, I build a form. Is it internal facing? Is it only to your internal customers? Is it external facing? Do you have students and parents looking at it? Do you have, you know, banking clients looking at it? Do you have investors looking at it? We want to make sure that we're designing this to the appropriate audience. How are they going to use it? Using a laptop? Using a phone? They're using a system that you've built, a custom front end, and you're going to use us as the back end? All these are considerations, right? Yeah, it's decisions. We can go and start puttering around and making stuff and kind of working on it. But again, all of this is driving to a central point, which is reducing your time to value. You've made an investment, made a large investment, right? We'll be real. We want to make sure that you're realizing the value of that investment as quickly as possible, and our goal is to help you get there. Load, transactions, number of users. You know, again, the million ways to build the thing. You know, there's a way I can build it that'll work great for one person. Maybe it doesn't work great when we hit 10. Whoop, uh-oh. Should have thought of that. Built it for 10. Now 2 months later, oh, we got 100 people. Wow, this thing's growing. We probably should have considered that. You know, there are many ways that you can do it. I have a rule processing system. Starts with maybe 100, 1,000. All of a sudden it's 100,000. 2 years from now it's 1,000,000. You know, there's different ways that we need to think about the overall project as we're designing it to take into consideration those different points. So out of this, what are the deliverables? What are we giving you? We mentioned it a couple times. I'm going to keep hammering it home. Every time I come to it, I'm going to hammer it home. Requirements and scoping doc. That's a standard document. Everybody's seen those, right? You have your different templates for it. Word's got a decent one. There's ones in Jira, right? Your standard scope document and requirements doc that says what we're building. Plain English, right? This is something I could hand to a business user. They could look at it and go, oh, I see. You're building me a web store. It integrates with, you know, this payment processor, and it connects to my back end and creates tickets and goes to my product system and submits an order that I can then ship out. And then the Agile RTM. That is the document that not only says what we're building, what are the stories behind it, but more importantly, how are we building it? What are the tasks? We go all the way down to the task level. I tell you exactly what we're building. We're building this flow, it does this thing. We're building this data type, it has these things in it. We're creating a rule set that has these things defined in it. I said rule set in case Josh was in here. He's not in here. We're building we're building some statement rules that do these things, right? What are the components? Here's the common misconception. what are we not doing in architecture? It's not hardware. That's the first thing I get. Every architecture engagement I go into, the first thing I talk about is how many servers do I need, what hardware do I need, what's the backend, what's the infrastructure, what's the networking, and how many EC2 nodes do I need to run it, right? Architecture informs that. So when I get done, when our team gets done working with you on what your scope is, then I can say, okay, to handle 1,000 users with 1 million transactions a year, that they're all using the UI, we probably need 3 clusters in a node. We're probably going to use Redis for the caching. We're probably going to use this S3 bucket for storage. We can help you define those things at that point. So although hardware was kind of part of it at the end, this informs those hardware discussions and decisions.
So MVP versus long-term planning. Minimally viable product, if you guys haven't heard of that before, that is the smallest component that of the use case that we can get value out of, right? Minimally viable product. The output of architecture, the scoping doc and the Agile RTM, can help define what is that MVP. What are the paths that are necessary for you guys to recognize value, right? From there, the MVP gives us that limited scope of the entire use case. But we want to do the MVP first, right? We are, by definition, we develop in an Agile framework, under an Agile methodology, right? So we want to start with the MVP. We want to put the MVP in front of a user community, small, medium, large, right, depending upon the engagement, and then define what release 2, release 3, release 4, release 5 looks like. Now, we're fully capable, obviously, of building out the entire use case. But we believe that we get a better adoption rate if we start small and build on that small build, right? We do take that Agile approach. We like the quick feedback from the client. We expect change, right? We want change in that the more change feedback that we get it ends up being closer to what the end user community expects. Again, build the entire use case, sure. It's more polished, right? It requires significantly more time to build, clearly, but it may not be flexible enough to handle the changes of that 10% knowledge worker that's sitting out on the edge of this use case.
Yeah, absolutely. And so what does it look like, right? So we've got a lot of color circles up here. It's very, very pretty. So we have a typical project, right? So this is 3 different phases of it. We have some API integrations. We have a rules profile creation site. We've got product list outputs. This is our project, right? I can't tell you what it does, but it does look kind of nice. And each one of these requirements, in this case, you have a bunch of parts around it, right? Yeah, generating lists and rules and integrating with ERPs and, exposing endpoints and all sorts of things happening as part of this project, right? When we talk about building an entire use case, that's what I'm talking about. So that's the whole thing. That's the whole kit and caboodle, everything that's needed to do it. And if you look there at the bottom, we've got 6 months worth of time probably invested to do it. Making up numbers, right? But for the ideas here. So when we actually talk about writing an MVP, what we're saying is, out of this, what do I need to actually build to get value from it now? Maybe not in 6 months, but maybe in 3 months, maybe in 4 months. What parts can I take out of this, or what parts can I leave in to actually do it? And that's what the MVP is, right? So I've taken some of these pieces out. For example, for this product list output, maybe I don't need to integrate with the ERP initially. To get value out of it, maybe all I need to do is generate a list, have some reports, and have a form that people can use to build their products. That integrate with ERP might be a nice to have, right? That's going to get you all the way. But if we want to prioritize certain items to reduce the time to value on this is a great way to do it, right? We define the absolute needs from the must-haves. And that's something we work with you on. We can kind of have an idea, but really the ultimate decision is informed by conversations we have with you. So it's a much smaller subset of tasks that'll get you value quickly. And what we do with this approach, as you saw on the previous slide with the different phases, is we work to implement this, right? We've taken, instead of spending 6 months getting the whole thing done, we've spent 3 and gotten part of it done. We implement that. Let's go live with this. Let's see what it does. Let's analyze it, right? Get user feedback. Wow, this thing's great, or wow, you really missed the mark on that. We're only 3 months in. We haven't invested a ton of time in this, right? We can iterate on this and keep moving until we get you exactly what you're looking for. But at some point, we've already started generating value in a much smaller amount of time. So out of that, what are our shared goals on this, right? Again, I know I keep saying it. You're going to get tired of hearing it from me, but realizing value from your investment as quickly as possible. That is our end goal. That's what we do. We're here as an augmentation to your team to help you analyze, implement, and iterate, right? We want to balance that, though, the triangle. Everybody likes the triangle, project management, between scope, budget, and time, right? How big is the scope? How much time do you have to invest in it? And how much money do you got? What's the budget for the project? And we work with you to make sure that these are aligned to define what the project needs to look like. Then we build the MVP to make it easily able to add features as you grow. So as we're building it, we're not building it in a bubble. We don't want to create an MVP that all of a sudden we've got to redo it in 3 months now to add this new feature. No. We want to think about that along the way, analyze those different points that may come up as the project matures, and ensure that we can start adding them on there if we need to, with minimal rework, right? So you still need rework sometimes, but as minimal as we can. So we always, though, always as part of this, want to think about scale and performance, right? If we start the project small, we can get a baseline of our performance, right? We can gauge what that needs to be. And from there, we can also estimate what we need to do differently, because again, a million ways to build something in the product, right? We got to find the right one that meets the scale you need. And when I start small, that's real easy to tune. Right? We don't have 1,000 levers to pull at that point. We have maybe 100 levers to pull at that point. We don't have to iterate across hundreds and hundreds of flows. Maybe we only built 50. It's much easier to start tuning things for better performance when we start small. Preparing, right? Okay, we told you what we expect. So, more feedback time before I jump into that, though. And this is a show of hands time. Again, we're making sure everybody's still awake. Have you ever had an unsuccessful software implementation? Not decisions. I don't want to hear it. Safe space. I don't want to hear that. And what was the root cause? Anybody? Just show of hands. Any project you've done? Scope creep. Scope creep is a great one. That happens a lot, right? Anybody else? A project?
What was, before you move on, what was the impact of scope creep to your time budget?
So the initial vision of the project, by the time the scope creep was unrecognizable.
Right.
And so,
It's no longer a 58-story skyscraper. It's a hotel on Virginia Beach oceanfront.
Yeah.
right?
yeah, just
Okay.
totally unrecognizable.
Yep. That's exactly what we're talking about here.
Effort going building this, and
Yeah.
now it's supposed to look like this, and so now we have to dump all this code into the front of it.
That's right. Now, in that engagement, did you start with an MVP, or did you want full bite of the elephant?
15 years ago too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's the reason why Agile exists now, right? Instead of traditional or waterfall. Okay, anybody else unsuccessful? No?
Oh, I'm going to call from the decisions people.
Oh, wait, there's a hand right
there.
there.
We go.
We had one actually recently that we were trying to go from prem to cloud, and the software just could not handle the amount of data we had.
Now, did you know before you started that project that you're going from prem to cloud? Okay. So understanding the unknown unknowns, right? Trying to get to forecast what is risk in your future, right? It's a part of what Tim's team does.
Absolutely. Anybody else? We got one more. Let's get 3 here. Oh, okay, we'll start here. And I'll
We'll
come
do
back.
4. You got 4?
Please.
Go for it.
So it went well. The problem was that users didn't adopt it.
So it was adoption issue?
Yep.
Yeah, it was a bit of perception. So everything went flawlessly, but when it was time to start using the tool, there was kind of a hesitation and fear of tech. So we didn't have that.
Yeah, and then as bugs start to pop up in that user community, adoption rates go straight down, right? Fall right off a cliff, right? That's normal. Iterations, right? Small MVP, get the MVP out to a select user community. Allow those users to provide that feedback early, super early, so we're not building up a bunch of technical debt, right? What was originally estimated as a 6-month build turns into a 1.5-year build because of that. So kind of reinforcing, like, let's MVP and let's understand what a product roadmap looks like over a longer term. You had one as well?
Yes, different industry, but a standard Apple software update caused a complete incompatibility with the editing software that our entire TV station was using. We had to completely overhaul the entire editing software that we were using. We were no longer able to utilize App Media Composer, and we had to completely overhaul to Adobe Premiere Pro. It was a complete budget overhaul. We had to invest an extreme amount of time, money, resources, and research and training into learning new technology,
Yeah.
buying the resources for new technology, and learning the new technology as well.
How long was the legacy platform in place?
The legacy platform had been in place for about 20 years. We've been
Okay.
utilizing Avid Media Composer for 20 years.
Yeah.
And the Apple computers we've been upgrading them steadily for at least the last 15. We had just gotten the newest models, but the latest software update just caused an incompatibility with the Avid Media Composer software. And sadly, Avid Media Composer could not keep up. Therefore, Adobe Premiere Pro ended up being the platform we had to go with because it was keeping up with
Yeah.
standard updates.
So end of life, right? I mean, that's really what that is. How did you attack the second that you guys recognized, oh my goodness, we're not budgeted for this year, but yet we have to get this thing done before whatever, September. How did you attack the replacement of the legacy platform?
Thankfully, we had a team member who was already familiar with
Okay.
Adobe Premiere Pro.
Yeah, that's a benefit.
They were able to guide us through the transition. They were able to train most of the team themselves.
Okay.
We were able to do it without outsourcing the training. They were able to guide us through the mass implementation as well.
Yeah.
A member of the school board had a connection with a person at Adobe, so we were able to get a discounted deal for the licensing agreement.
Mm-hmm.
So we were able to license a very good deal with Adobe for the school system's utilization of Adobe Premiere Pro for our editing softwares. And thankfully, we were able to implement it within just about 3 months.
Yeah.
And the training was thankfully very streamlined since many of the students had already been learning how to utilize Adobe Premiere in their off time. But
So it made sense, right, due to the age of the product. Many people, I guess, are in this room because they intend to leverage decisions for like a middleware, right? Not the right answer for you in this case, right? But what is the legacy system and what is the net new system and how are we going to connect those two, right? So as to not lose the historic workflow, but to allow for a future workflow. It's commonly used, common use in decisions, specifically in the rules engine. Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Any other? Yeah. Mr. Adam Street.
Where users, well, this is not,
Oh, okay. Thank goodness.
users were not involved in the project design at all. They just gave us a basic requirement.
Yep.
At the end, one of the developers that was, on the project described the problem as, you guys wanted a tricycle, we built you a bicycle.
That's right. That's it. That's architecture right there. That's a snapshot of it, for sure.
And it leads right into this. So
Yeah. What does failure and success look like, right? Not failure and success of an architecture session, but ultimately your time to value, right? That's what that is. We live in that space, that KPI of time to value. People sign a license agreement. We want to get you live as soon as possible. And it really boils down to how prepared is the client when we engage in that time-boxed consultative engagement, right? That time-box event. How prepared is the client when we start that? When architects are doing discovery, we're time-boxed, right? We have an agreement. It's an engagement, statement of work and everything, right? Process maps, project deliverables. Somebody somewhere created a project charter, right? That documentation that was associated with that project charter, that's important for our architects to consume because it has content like expected SLAs, right? Who is the user community? How big is the user community? How often is the user community going to be accessing the system? Mock-ups for UIs, right? Come prepared in the architecture engagement with what you have in your head, what you visualize, what a form or a dashboard or an end form. What is the UX of that, right? Are we cancels and OKs left to right, or are we OKs and cancels right to left?
and
right?
we're good with it on a napkin.
We're good with it on a napkin.
Perfectly
But
fine.
some sort of vision of how you expect it to look and act is important. That's how we maximize this time. I'll hammer this because this is where we get caught all the time. It's the involvement of a subject matter expert, right? If we are in an engagement that is leveraging an external database, your DBA should be included in the conversation, right? At the end, 8 months into a longer-term project, all of a sudden, new stakeholder DBA shows up and throws a monkey wrench in everything, right? Builds a bunch of technical debt. We have 6 months, now we have an additional 6 months to build what the expected output was. We can help define during architecture what the end state looks like, right? It will require additional development time, right? But it's really kind of a focus on let's look at a product roadmap, let's MVP, and let's build on from there. Output of the output is the Agile RTM, right? It's a living document. It is handed off to an implementation team, and then implementation team iterates upon that upon feedback with the client, right? This is a normal Agile environment. The RTM may say at the initial estimate it's 200 hours worth of dev labor, but it can grow, right? It's not a complete 200 hours, it's 200 hours of dev time and tool. So the expectation of labor coming out of an RTM doesn't include the rest of the components of an SDLC. And it's important that as a part of that architecture engagement to be successful, that our clients understand that.
Yeah, absolutely. And so again, we've kind of talked about this. Love the little cake icon. It's kind of nice. So what do you get as part of this? We've entered an agreement. We've done all this great work. We've worked with you for a few weeks on getting these deliverables created. What are they, right? So it starts with the scoping document. Okay, we talked about that. The requirements document, plain English description of what we're building, business need, description of the project, wireframes, process models, ERDs. This is something that we could hand anyone in the organization. They should be able to take a look at from a high level, maybe the first page. We don't want them to go down the details, but first page, understand what you're building and why. Okay, what problem are we solving? How are we solving it? The second is our work breakdown structure, or in our case, what it feeds into is an Agile RTM, right? A requirements traceability matrix. Very fancy term for product requirements that we start from that scoping doc, right? We want them to link. I want to be able to look at a requirements doc and be able to follow it to the RTM, and vice versa. So we take those requirements. I want to build a building. We decompose them into product backlog items. So tab 2, and I'll show you what these look like in 2 seconds.
User stories.
User stories, exactly. So as a user, I need to be able to have a residence in downtown San Francisco. Okay, and then to the individual tasks behind it. Okay, well, I've got to build a building, I've got to build a foundation, to keep using that same thing. What the task level allows me to do is, as a decisions person, I can say, I know that building a flow that's going to take in a payload and it's going to deserialize it and it's going to run against a rule set, it's going to take a decisions developer, important point here, decisions developer, X time to create it, 2 to 4 hours probably. Because they got to look at the requirements, they got to build the data structures, they got to put the steps together, they got to test it and break it 3 times, and then go back and get the way that actually works, right? That allows us to do that time estimation. Out of this, we also do mock-ups. We love Lucid. We don't use Figma, but we love Lucid, right? We're going to give you mock-ups of an idea of what it's going to look like. Sometimes, to be honest, it's easier for me and quicker for me to just go into decisions and mock it up in real time in the product. And a lot of times that's what I do. Some of our folks use Lucid to do it. But basically, what is this going to look like so we can agree on what the expected outcome is? If we do OK and cancel, it needs to be cancel OK. We caught it real early before we spent a whole lot of time doing it. And finally, the known unknowns. What are the things that we can uncover as part of this process that are undefined, right? Maybe you said, I have this integration I want to work with, and it's to Jira, and I want it to be able to create tickets. We don't quite know how yet. We know there's endpoints out there. We know we're going to do it. I can estimate a task that says, it's probably going to take 4 to 8 hours because I got to get the authorization right, and I got to figure out the endpoint, what the payload looks like, and all that. So we block those out. We call those out at the beginning of the project. We're all on the same page. We know we'll get there when we get there. It'll be fine. It'll probably take us 4 or 8 hours to do it. We don't have all the detail yet, so I can't tell you exactly, but close enough, right? Okay, so what do these things actually look like, right? So this is, and if anybody wants this, feel free, reach out. My contact information at the end. We have samples here of what these things look like, right? So this is a basic requirements doc. It's our sample, right? We have a project for Address Corp. We want to basically do an address cleanup project within the company. Well, what does that mean? Well, we'll get past all the this project management stuff here. He loves when I say that. But we start with our goals and purpose, right? What are we doing? What are we building? Why are we doing it? And what's the scope behind it, right? Are we cleaning up every address in the whole known universe in our system? Yeah, probably not. We're doing a subset of it. I don't care about people I haven't seen in 20 years. I only care about the people I've seen in the past year, maybe, right? What's that scope? Are we using certain modules to do it? Decisions has a USPS module I can use, throw an address at it. It'll throw back a valid one. Cool, we got that. How are we doing it? What systems are we integrating with to do it? What's the process model look like? How does it come in? How's the data flow? What are we doing with the databases? And we keep going down. There's, you know, like, what are the requirements for it? What do the data points look like? This is what our architects do, okay? We're building this out for you. How are we gonna do it? What processes are we gonna take to do it? And what's that going to look like? Well, from that, we actually build out our Agile RTM, right? So this is just an example of one that we had built for this same project, right? These are the requirements. So if I went back to the scoping document and looked, I'm gonna have a requirement that says we need a user Excel import. We need a way for a user to upload a file of address updates, and it needs to have a notification that it's done and an email notification when the process completed. Well, cool, okay, that's good. We got some acceptance criteria here. Everything's been done, final notifications work, records are inserted into a database. We have a high level understanding of what we're doing, right? We can read that and know what that is. But the goal of this is then to break that down, to decompose that. So maybe there's some backlog items associated with that particular requirement, right? Oh, we have to have, if we look at 1, so we got 1.1, 1.2, 1.3. So 1.1 was the first one, importing a file. Okay, well, as a user, I should have the ability to have a form that comes up and I can import a file, right? We've really started to decompose that requirement down. And then after that, we can pull it down to the task level of, okay, what does it take to actually do that? Well, I can see now there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 odd different things I need to do as a decisions developer to create that process, right? We started with something high level. I need to bring some addresses in. Well, how do I do it? Okay, well, I build a form that does it. Well, what does that entail? Well, it actually entails creating a data importer group and a design folder project and an address type and an import form. But at each one of these areas, let's scroll right here, got a time estimate, right? When it's something small, I can say, creating a data type and decisions, decisions developers should be able to do that in 15 minutes. That's pretty easy. If I give them all the detail they need, copy paste into our data structure builder, they create it, it's ready to go. Building a form, probably take 2 hours. Got to get the mock-up right. Got to make it look right. We're going to make it look bad the first time, just to get everything on the page. Then we'll get the colors, we'll get the fonts, all that fun stuff. But what this allows us to do is at the very end, I can take all of these estimates. It's very hard doing it this way. But I can sum them up, right? And I can say, how long is that going to take? Dev complete, 26.5 hours, 26.4 hours, 2.5, whatever it says. Again, dev hours, right?
Yeah, not feedback loop, not UAT.
But how long was it going to take a decisions-trained developer that we have on our staff to build this out? I can give you that estimate. So at least we have a starting point. We know when we quote you out, we can say, that's going to take me about a couple weeks of dev work. We're going to add in some time for testing. We're going to add some time for the feedback loop. We're going to add in some time for the known unknowns. But at least we have an idea to start with. Whereas if I just went out and said, I want to build this project, well, I have no idea. I haven't gotten all the details yet. You know, I can t-shirt size it. You know, we do that here. We could say, that's probably a small project. You know, I could take a look at it and been in the tool long enough to know that. But now I can really give you a good estimate of it. And that's the whole point when we come to this of what we're trying to do here. And I apologize, it missed where I was. Give me 2 seconds here. Please go back to where you were. That would be great. It did not. That's pretty cool. Hey, it's my notes.
Okay, so build versus buy. The output, the deliverables of scoping engagement or architecture engagement, it gives you the time and the scope, right? You apply the budget, but it gives you the time and the scope, the estimated time, the understood scope, so that you as clients can make a build versus buy decision. Do I invest as a company, do I invest in bringing on new developers to be decisions developers, understand that it takes time to develop a subject matter expertise within decisions? Do I build it myself, right? Or do I buy it? So from the professional services side, we have full sprint teams, and we have a vehicle by which to quote that now, right? We can tell you what the time is for that, the labor investment to build it for a decisions developer, right? So those decisions, those affect two of the corners of the triangle, right? What is your budget, I guess, is really up to you. But you have an informed decision now. You can make an informed decision now.
Yeah, absolutely. So wrapping up, we're coming up on time, right? So what does, again, a successful implementation look like, right? It's really, again, we're here to help you identify what you're building and how. What is the thing we're doing and how are we doing it, right? We're ensuring, working with you, that the correct stakeholders are involved and committed to the project. We touched on that briefly, but it is paramount to success. We have to have the people who use the product, know the thing, know the details behind how it works, are on the front line. They've got to be involved in the project, so we uncover the known unknowns sooner rather than later. We uncover UI, mock-up issues. We uncover flow decisions sooner. And that the scope between us is clearly defined. We want to make sure when we enter this agreement, we're building what you want us to build. We don't want to spend 6 months building something, you get it and go, oh man, you missed it. Again, back to you built me a blue car and I needed a red bicycle. Like, they're both vehicles, we got close, but we want to define that scope, right? We want to work with you on ensuring an MVP is possible if it is. In some cases it may not be, most cases it is. We'll help you define that. And how, of course, can we reduce your time to value? And of course, that the project is going to meet the expectations related to scalability and reliability, right? Architecture and architecting your solution is the key to your success and reduce time to value within decisions. With that, anybody have any questions? Please.
To the point you just made regarding making a decision between training your own team and bringing on professional services.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just curious, what is the average time it takes you to bring the developer up to speed to be part of the professional services?
From a 0% knowledge worker through our training and through exposure, right? That's what builds the experience. It's about 6 months, give or take, right? And just to be clear on where I wasn't before, we have two kind of models within professional services. Clients who want to invest in their own developers, we have process coaching, right? So if it's very common practice. I actually thought that the T&M lead was in here, but he's not. A client invests in development labor on their side. Developer starts to become accustomed to the decision, goes through our training, right? Starts to put themselves through scenarios, build scenarios, pitfalls, failure points. They have process coaching, our professional services time and materials folks available to consult, right? So very common practice is if our client is working off, let's say, 2-week sprints, client developer will build 2 weeks, and then our process coaching resource comes in before the sprint demo, preferably, and does a quick 1 hour review of what was built and says, okay, this is not, yes, it meets your definition of done based on your acceptance criteria, right? But this is not going to be performative, right? Because I know based on our RTM, 4 sprints down the road, right, we're, I don't know, we have this external integration with a bunch of data, DB hits, right? So you can't build it this way. You have to go back to the RTM and build it this way. It's usually about a 1 hour engagement every 2 weeks, so we recommend that as well if you are investing in your own development resources. On the other side, it's obviously professional services, right? Full sprint team. So about 6 months, at about a year mark, I guess, of time and tool, and I guess some of my folks in the back might back me up on this, is where you really develop that expertise, right? You've been through the fire in several scenarios. You've built up a bunch of technical debt over your last 6 months that you've had to go back and fix, and you have lessons learned from that. Yep, you're welcome.
And that should be, if we talk about time to ready, time to billable, as I would call it, for a decisions developer, if you think about a traditional software developer, most go through 4 years of CS. So it does sound, when we're standing up here saying, man, it's 6 months, I know it can sound daunting, right? But we're being honest with you. It is a tool that can do a lot. It's a tool that has a lot of features in it, and it's a tool that does take some time to get into, just like any other.
Other questions? No?
My biggest struggle is always to figure out what the
I'm sorry, Andy, figure out.
integration type is.
Oh, yeah.
And I always feel like it drives the rest of the project. If I, let's say, start with a simple data structure and users want some actions and stuff. This is like, I guess what I'm saying is, I went through all your sprints, and they were great. One of the things that maybe should be more emphasized is how to make the decision.
On the training side. Okay, yeah, I misunderstood. Yeah, so from the training side, yeah, more of an emphasis to that on external connections. Yeah, APIs. We'll definitely let them know, and we clamor for it too, to spend a little bit more time focusing on that.
Yeah. Well,
All right.
Thanks,
Thank you,
everyone.
guys. We appreciate your time.
We'll be around all week.